Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar sponsored by R0. My name is Katie Gillum. I'm the event director, and I'll be your host for today's session. First, I'll cover some quick housekeeping items. If you experience technical difficulties with audio or advancing slides, refresh your screen with F5. That usually takes care of most of our issues, but if you continue to experience any other issues, hit the question mark button and you'll receive some assistance from our very highly trained professionals. At any point during the presentation, you can submit your questions into the Q&A window on the left-hand side of your screen. And in 24 hours, you'll receive a link to watch the recording of the session. So you don't have to put it in the Q&A. Yes, you will receive a recording of this session. So now I would like to introduce you to our panel of speakers today. So we're very happy to be joined by Jennifer Nuckles, Chairperson and CEO of R0, and Elizabeth Redmond, Director of Sales, Building Intelligence for R0. So I will kick it off to Jennifer. The floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for joining Elizabeth and myself. I am going to give just a quick background on R0 so I can provide some context as to what we do, and then we'll go into the meat of the topic, which is really the scaling of smart building automations. When we think about the sustainable world, especially with kind of the outcomes that are being required by 2030, just over the next 5.5 years, we all have an incredible amount of knowledge to be gained, as well as opportunity ahead of us. So what R0 does, just in a nutshell, is we make data useful. So we have a building data platform that measures and identifies alerts for all of our stakeholders. They understand what's happening in the building, and then we link into the BMS to actually drive outcomes in terms of operational efficiencies, as well as sustainable use of technology, as well as energy emissions. So let's go to the next slide. I'll do that. All right. So as I talked about, we're really here to talk about building automations for carbon reduction. So here's our agenda. We're going to go through the importance of smart building technologies today. We're going to go through the rise of the non-traditional workplace, specifically as we're seeing this over the past couple of years. Then we're going to really talk about the business case for comfort. In the past, there's been a trade-off between tenant experience and running a building. And so now it's really nice to see that that trade-off doesn't need to exist, and the application of technologies to make it seamless for the owners, operators, the landlords, the tenants, so that we can accomplish both. We're then going to go through some use cases, starting with automations driving energy efficiencies, as well as operational efficiencies. And then I'll give you just a little bit more detail about R0 in case you want to reach out to Elizabeth and I for any information. Really, we're here as advocates and champions of the sustainable workplace to see how we can all make our buildings more automated for the future. All right. So let's just take a step back and think about what's happening in the build environment today. Right now, owners are facing just a variety of challenges to drive efficiencies and maximize the ROI of their real estate portfolios. Elizabeth and I are both based in California, specifically in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is kind of demonstrative of a city situation, especially over the past several years. We've seen owners as well as tenants really focus on their cost efficiencies and pulling costs out of their P&L. And they're also at the same time facing just the changing workplace that's evolved coming out of the pandemic, and really new uses and applications for the built environment. Specifically, how does commercial real estate look? Does it look different going forward? How should we adopt different practices within the built environment? So there's all these different challenges that are coming to the owners from different directions. And at the same time, what we have in 2024 is an abundance of data. And so what owners are doing is they have all this data at their fingertips. They don't necessarily know how to act against it. Maybe insights aren't being provided, and they're really looking to improve efficiencies, really to drive cost efficiencies and improve the profitability of the real estate portfolio. So here are just some quick trends that pull this out. Trend one, this is a Deloitte 2024 commercial real estate outlook. And what they found is that 60% of the respondents, asset owners, said that lack of data processes and internal controls are necessary to meet the compliance standards, meaning that 60% of them don't have that information that's required. Similarly, on a trend too, CBRE launched a global workplace and occupancy insights report, just hot off the presses. 43% is the number that CRE organizations are under pressure to decrease their footprint by more than 30% over the next 3 years. So almost half of our commercial real estate organizations are looking to change their square footage that they exist over the next short term, even before the 2030 deadline. And then finally, the Trend 3 source, this is from JLL, they ran a study looking at the next frontier for green building certifications. And what they're noticing is that a premium for green Class A office space is 7 to 12% right now. So this is really suggesting that sustainable practices will future-proof asset values. Hugely important, because when you think about the value of real estate globally, it's enormous. And so being able to charge a premium on that real estate and actually drive top line revenue, in addition to pulling out the costs that we mentioned, so important, improves the overall profitability of the real estate portfolio. Okay. So here's what I want to do just in terms of overviewing a smart building platform. So this is R0's platform. What we do is really 3 things. Number 1 is we measure data within the building. Number 2 is we provide insights and alerts to the stakeholders. And then number 3 is we provide autonomous outcomes. So really making automation very easy in terms of controlling the building systems, whether it's lighting, whether it's energy consumption. So what this means is that when you look at real-time data and automations, this is measuring occupancy, indoor air quality, HVAC usage, lighting controls. We also look at alerts that are around threshold and maintenance. So for example, our stakeholders would get an alert if they had a fault that was detected, or if they were not, conference rooms were not up to the tenant experience level and needed maintaining. We also have instant security responses that come with these alerts. From an operational efficiency, what this means is that energy and carbon can be reduced. We have smart cleaning workflows, which I'm going to go through with you all. And then again, these diagnostics as to the performance of the building. And then third, what this results in is the premium experiences. So as I mentioned, historically, there's been a trade-off between tenant comfort and running a building, and this doesn't have to exist anymore. You don't need to work in an uncomfortable building just because we're looking to save energy. So that the heating and the cooling should actually be running to maintain comfort of the tenant, not really to maintain airflow within the building itself. And we do this based on preference-based searches. And then we also provide all of the carbon compliance and reporting for our stakeholders. So as you can see, there's all of the data that's coming together, allowing our stakeholders to make really informed decisions. And then we make those decisions for them in conjunction with them. So what this really goes through, let's start from the bottom of the honeycomb. At the bottom, you see all of the functional attributes that exist within our platform. So occupancy sensors, these occupancy sensors not only count the number of people in a room, but actually detect presence. They look at passive occupancy, as we call it, which would be an inanimate object. Many of you have probably tried to reserve a conference room only to find out that it's actually reserved already. But when you look through the glass walls, all that's in there is a backpack. So that would be an example of passive occupancy. We have our indoor air quality and our indoor environmental quality sensors. These are really important. I'll go through those as a use case a little bit later. Indoor air quality, just as a note, is not just the health of the air, but it's everything from temperature, humidity, particulate matter, CO2 levels, which contribute to sleepiness for human capital. So this is something that's very important. The built environment has only been raised in importance over the past couple of years, specifically as ASHRAE came out with new recommended standards, ASHRAE 241, which call for different levels of indoor air quality within the commercial settings. We have our smart filters. Many buildings that you all probably are familiar with have upgraded filtration levels from MERV 8 to MERV 13, 14, or 15. So we have a series of smart filters that actually provide that higher efficacy of MERV ratings, but at a much lower cost. Again, all to improve the operational efficiency of the building. And then we have the BACnet gateway. So really to make sure that we integrate within the BMS. So what this looks like is, control in the middle of honeycombs, control of the HVAC and lighting, data aggregation and normalization and benchmarking for our stakeholders so they can actually have predictive modeling. We use our machine learning and AI models to do so. And then again, the link into the BMS, and then we link into the tenant apps as well. So tenants are getting those alerts, as I mentioned. The outcomes that are generated are effective space utilization, smarter workflows, which is enormously important for a number of reasons, not the least of which it's hard to find and hire human capital and talent, or human capital is very expensive. Fault detection, as I mentioned, so to avoid kind of erroneous maintenance requirements going forward in a building, and then energy management. The U.S., just for context, is annually $27.5 billion that's spent on energy in the commercial real estate sector, and 70% of that is due to the HVAC. So I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth now, who's going to go through some changes that we've seen in the traditional workplace movement over the past couple of years.
Thanks, Jennifer. Let's just keep rolling here. So as we all know, we have images in our mind of what a workplace is, rows and rows of cubicles, rows and rows of desks. And this has evolved significantly over the past 3-4 decades, but even more so aggressively over the last 5 years. And what is very interesting here is, the form of the workstation was very intentionally designed to provide privacy, and the form that the workplace is taking today is very intentionally designed to create these collision moments. And when we work with workplace stakeholders, that is top of mind, is how can we get workers to engage with each other and interact with each other when they come to the office. And that's the most significant and important time that they're designing for and building for within the office. And so we're seeing a myriad of services that are layered on top of workplace operations so that it is treated as a hybrid environment. We have cafes, spa-like environments that feel like you're home, comfortable for just a sit down and a conversation that may have nothing to do with work, and they're very intentionally designing for those moments. When we kind of dive into our own data that we capture using our occupancy and utilization studies, sensors, we see some very interesting and telling trends. So what R0 does is we aggregate data across multiple locations on a quarterly basis, and we publish some of this information, benchmarking utilization globally across accounts and workplaces. So what we have spotted in the previous quarter as a trend is, and also lagging from previous quarters before what you see here in Q2, is that a culture of office first. You see peaks of 100% utilization, but these are often in those collaborative environments or intentionally designed focused spaces. So there's significantly less utilization in areas like workstations that may be open office and were designed to allow for less square footage per occupant, as they were designed when people were primarily 5 days a week in the office. And even on an average basis, that's consistent, where you see phone booths and collaborative both at 60%, a peak of 100% for the office first organizations. And this also leads to another trend that is very consistent and commonly discussed of there's conversation of what's called coffee badgers, or people coming in just for lunch. And that is supported by a lot of organizations of, yes, please come to the office for lunch so you're spending time with your colleagues. This is very telling in our data, whereas previously in years pre-pandemic, we may have seen dips during the lunch hours of people vacating the office and coming back to do their work. We're actually seeing highest utilization hours in the middle of the day. So people may be coming in for meetings in the middle of the day or just to spend time collaborating or spending time with their colleagues. And that is also leading to other data that we understand. What Jennifer previously quoted was this number that you see at the top here of $27 billion in energy consumption is contributed to only the office sector. And so what this chart is looking at is the billions that are spent across the entire corporate real estate asset environment. And what we find really interesting here is, in contrast with utilization trends where we're very intentionally measuring by space type, so we understand there's a certain square footage associated with each workstation versus a conference room or a meeting seat. There's also dollars associated with each one of those and kilowatt hours associated with each one of those. So if you have a high vacancy rate, a certain space type, we can identify, where is there opportunity to, one, optimize the energy utilization, as well as decrease, your overall square footage so that you're only occupying what is being used. And so when we look at this chart here and looking at the office sector, for example, the total spend in energy use is higher than any other of the asset types. Whereas somewhere like an inpatient hospital, it's no surprise that the energy intensity is the highest because we have lots of devices in these locations or 24-hour facilities. However, as in comparison, again, across office, the total energy spend is still lower. So this all indicates that corporate real estate is the biggest problem to solve, and potentially the most challenging. It also covers the greatest amount of square footage. So this is roughly 5 billion just in the US alone of square footage in corporate real estate. And one final element here is around just where the breakdown is between these different within the energy spend. So we see the key here at the top of space heating is a very, very significant element of that. Cooling, significant as well, highly dependent on the climate that you're in. There may be a different distribution depending on the climate, but this is the average. Ventilation being the third. So those are the three that are incorporated in our traditional HVAC spend. So again, back to Jennifer's comment of the greatest majority of that being attributed to HVAC within any of these real estate asset types. And then lighting is another area where we can have significant impact. So lighting is typically about 10% of the energy spend, but there is significant opportunity for optimizing lighting as well. So if we think of, again, back to the utilization trends, even if we're seeing 40% utilization on average, there's a huge opportunity to optimize the HVAC and lighting consumption based on where people are. And this is really where we build a business case for moving into smart buildings and controls. But what is also the big opportunity is ensuring that the occupants of the space feel safe and comfortable and are able to do their best work and remain productive. So we're going to speak a bit about the business case for comfort, and then I'm going to hand it back to Jennifer after this to go through some of those use cases in a bit more detail. The opportunity for measuring indoor air and environmental quality is really centered around these three central areas. So there's indoor air quality and comfort, those two being in balance, but also, understanding that there are kind of two different categories of measurement. We have air quality that's typically associated with particulate matter, CO2, comfort that's typically associated with temperature, humidity, just as a baseline, but then also elements of noise, luminosity. These are all attributed to our different neurodiverse attributes and how we experience space. And every single individual experiences a space differently. And that is what contributes to a space being productive. So can a space be accommodating to individuals' preferences? And can it be searchable based on preferences and such? And all of this leads to various space planning practices. So if there is data available on how did the acoustics actually perform according to the way that they were designed, we often get into instances where we're doing what's called pre-occupancy measurement as well as post-occupancy. And this is really where the space planning insights comes into play. And for new construction, building certifications and that premium real estate is a huge element of creating premium real estate. So having a LEED certified building, well-certified buildings that are maintained year over year, and that certification's maintained year over year, is very important and creates those kind of marquee locations that that tenants are looking for. As Jennifer mentioned, 7 to 14% is what they get on the premium of quality real estate, and bringing that to market. When we think about the impacts of environmental quality on the various elements of experience space, the kind of 4 categories that we put these into are productivity, well-being, comfort, and health. And all of those are kind of considered in balance while building for a more sustainable environment. So there's also parallels of sustainability to ESG, and often ESG is referred to in the context of sustainability, but ESG really covers the social element of, and that really has to take into consideration the well-being and the health of the occupants. And so this is really why it's incredibly important to measure air quality within the built environment. And finally, what we find most interesting and most compelling is that when we're measuring IAQ and IEQ, there are different stakeholders who have come to the table. So the developers may be interested in elements of noise and temperature because they're going into a new build and they want to get ahead of comfort and complaints. It is a well-researched fact that thermal comfort, even just a drift of 4 degrees, can have a 9% impact on a company's bottom line. So when building a new space, when developers are considering the build out of a new space, that is a data point that is top of mind. They don't want locations that will have thermal drift, experience thermal drift, and they want to make sure that they're maintaining that. And similarly for the operators, once they take that building over, they want to make sure that they have the ability to not only measure it, but maintain that optimal temperature and humidity, which is, very specifically between 40 and 60% at optimal humidity. And as I mentioned earlier, everyone experiences spaces differently. So if there's opportunity in the future for, the future landscape of smart buildings to make spaces searchable based on preference, make spaces experienceable based on, what temperature is comfortable to you, that is a big one. The second block here, as I'm speaking about operators, lighting is a really interesting element as well. So lighting is what energizes us, what may bring us ideas when we're in a meeting setting. Dim lighting may be more conducive to other activities. And so lighting, making a space searchable based on lighting levels is important. But lighting can also have a significant impact on temperature. If we have some natural lighting that's coming in the afternoon based on north-facing buildings, that has an impact. And that temperature, if it is rising over the course of the day, we want to make sure that that is readable in real time, and the operators can respond to that in real time, or at least in a predictive manner. On the third here, the sustainability team often gets engaged in IAQ procurement. And this, as I mentioned, is kind of bred out of the ESG practices. So reporting across that full ESG opportunity, the sustainability teams often get more engaged with elements like CH2O, which is formaldehyde. So is there formaldehyde present at the entry after a new build or a post-construction move-in? And how quickly does that formaldehyde degrade over time or trail off or off gas, essentially? And is that being ventilated out? Is the HVAC doing its job by moving fresh air into the environment? And then PM is the particulate matter. When you're measuring multiple different variants of particulate matter, then it's easier to get into the diagnostics of what is actually present in the environment. Is it pollens? Is it dust that is created by the occupants of the space? Or is it dust that's created by the fact that your filters need to be replaced? And so getting into a very high granularity of particulate matter measurement really understands how much this is impacting the health of the occupants. Are we creating conditions that are poor for asthmatic prone occupants or other? And of course, as we go back to the different asset types, looking at the inpatient hospital environments, it's incredibly important to be mindful of those elements in the indoor environment. And then finally, on workplace experience, again, particulate matter is very important. We want to make sure that we don't have any creating any poor environments for our aspiration, as well as elements like CO2 that may cause cognitive decline within a conference room if we have poor ventilation. And so all of these elements that may be measured in the context of IAQ or comfort contribute significantly to detecting issues early on, so we can mitigate costs later on in the life cycle of a building. There is other information and research supporting that we have low engagement of occupants and workers within the office. There's research that's been put out of surveyed Americans stating that they feel only about 35% of them reporting that they're engaged at work. And 75% of those list stress as their number one element of not being engaged within the workplace. And within that category, health and productivity are the primary concerns. And so that is a very important indicator. We all know that people are the most important and costly asset to an organization by a factor of 10 to real estate and utilities. And so making sure that we're creating environments that preserve productivity and give organizations the best opportunity for retaining those employees. And similarly for property managers and operators to retain their tenants. It's the same element of productivity that's being attuned to. So across the opportunity for comfort, we are really looking at the ability to provide more productive spaces and provide spaces that are conducive to keeping people within the buildings. And I will pass this back over to Jennifer as we go through some use cases on how we automate based on that.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. And I think there's a couple questions that are coming in real time. So what we'll do is answer those as we go through these use cases. I think this will help bring this to life through examples, but we're also happy to go a little bit more in depth throughout the use cases as well as in live Q&A. So as Elizabeth mentioned, we're going to cover the use cases that are really focused on two different areas, their energy and operations efficiencies. So let's start with the utilization and comfort across the portfolio. So as we mentioned, both in the introduction as well as in the premium experiences conversations, right now it's really come to light that we don't need to make the trade-offs between comfort of the tenants and their utilization of the space and the operations and costs of running the business in the building. So one thing that we do through automation is we analyze how the building is actually being used. What this allows us to do, which you see on the right-hand side, is you can see at the real time by the minute utilization of specific spaces. We also see daily vacancies. We see occupancy, which is again dependent on both people as well as inanimate objects. The reason why this is so important, many people in the past were using badge swipes to tell when buildings were entered and exited. However, there's many faults with those, not alone piggybacking off of someone who lets you in or not actually swiping the badge to go in a room, using the room reservation system that actually doesn't tie to how the room is being utilized. So what we do with our sensors is we are able to tell on a real-time basis by the minute how spaces are being utilized in what configuration. And what this allows our stakeholders to do is first and foremost look at the correct spatial utilization of their portfolio. This helps with their costs because they can project the tenant renewals with utilization, looking at the peak usage data by building, by floor, by suite. So you get very granular. And then what many of our customers do is actually use this by building to project into their entire portfolio. So this would allow them to see what their real estate footprint should look like. It also allows us to depict the desirable layout, so you can see on a real-time basis how stakeholders are using the spaces, whether they are in collaboration spaces, whether they are in office rooms, individual office rooms, cafeteria areas. We've had a number of clients who've actually taken some of the large-scale cafeteria spaces and converted those to different collaboration centers based on different usage patterns, and then the amenities, including like the gym or the breakout rooms or libraries in room buildings, restrooms, if the amenities are actually spaced appropriately for the tenant usage. And this really allows them to determine where to invest the capital. So you think about what solutions are necessary here that we offer. Occupancy analytics, as I mentioned, it's occupancy plus. So it's not just people counting, but it's type of occupant, it's time-based, which we call dwell time, it's entry and exit, which is like when they pass the threshold of a room. And then we also analyze through our indoor air quality sensors, as Elizabeth mentioned, not just particulate matter and CO2 levels and humidity and temperature, but a whole host of different things which are contributing to the quality of the room, but also contributing to the tenant experience, which are predominantly based on usage and how the building is occupied. The second thing this allows our stakeholders to do is really get ahead, so be proactive around potential air quality issues or comfort complaints. This is really important in that flight to quality that we talked about, because stakeholders, tenants are really demanding high quality buildings. And so if you think about buildings that are both automated as well as use technology to solve for the problems, what this allows for is threshold alerts, as I mentioned, for different temperatures, if a room is too cold, too hot, humidity levels, which affect both people, but also equipment, and the air quality metrics that we discussed. And then we do an integration into the BMSs for real-time controls. So this means that you don't necessarily need to treat a building as a one-size-fits-all and kind of a blunt instrument. Many buildings are running their lighting and their HVAC 24/7 when they don't need to be, or they're cooling their buildings in some of the more temperate regions before people come into the spaces so that they can prep the space before people actually enter. And it's a pretty inefficient way of actually working within the building controls. We support the fault detection analysis, which I'm going to let Elizabeth speak about a little bit, because there's a question here from Craig as to what's included in the fault detection. And then I'll go into some energy management in a couple slides, but I want to make sure we talk about this here. And Elizabeth, maybe you can talk about the building certification points too, just since you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, so with regards to fault detection, the way we think about fault detection specifically is where it may be outside of the typical context, but pulling that all the way through to what are the most critical insights to extract, which are the opportunities that you really need to look at. So one example of this in a functioning workplace environment is a customer identified that they didn't have really a good opportunity or a good way to measure temperature, humidity in some of their smaller rooms and some of their portable infrastructure like phone booths. As you see in the background on this this background here. So phone booths are a really good example to dive into. They're removed from your typical mechanical system, but they do have ventilation designed into them. And sometimes that ventilation may fail and the operators are not going to know anything about that. Facility managers within the tenants may not know anything about it. And they get complaints. So the opportunity is really getting ahead of those complaints, measuring all of the various environments, measuring down to the room level, what is the active temperature and humidity in real time, and being able to report that as anything drifting significantly off of its set point. So phone booths, for example, if that ventilation does fail, you'll have readings at 75 degrees consistently, especially if somebody's sitting in there for a longer period of time. And that's definitely going to lead to some cognitive decline, and temperature may just be an indicator of a broader problem where, you know, there's stuffiness being experienced, but it's actually a high level of CO2 because the ventilation's turned off. And similarly, in some other spaces throughout the building where the HVAC may not be particularly operating to the same level. And so that has impacts on filtration, all of the elements that we talked about earlier, CO2 and particulate matter, and temperature can be an indicator for all of that. So this is really why we think that temperature is so significant, and it's included in all of our occupancy sensors as temperature and humidity measurement. And that then generates, you know, it's always important to be able to have the charting within analytics, but being able to see a list that you can respond to in real time, and a list that is prioritized based on how significant the impact may be to the organization. Is there temperature drifts across a whole quadrant of a building, multiple floors of a building on one side of it, or within one specific space type, like a phone booth? And that all kind of being queued up for the facility manager or the operator of the building. And so that's kind of the extent to which we get involved in fault detection. And then, you know, as it continues to expand, being able to consume the data, as Jennifer mentioned, of our ability to ingest data as well, and looking at water and the mechanical systems, and getting into that larger fault detection coverage.
Do you want to make a couple quick points on building certification? Yeah,
so the certifications are of course important, and if you're going to go through the effort of implementing air quality monitoring, at least contributing to a few points on your LEED certification, your WELL certification for the building, there are certain elements that need to be checked off, essentially, and that includes CO2, particulate matter, temperature, humidity. Formaldehyde is a specific one that is important to some of the rating systems. And if any of you are tracking LEED 5, there will be significant coverage for air quality in the new, the currently reviewed version of LEED 5 certification ratings, which is expected in 2025.
All right. So this is just an example of how we engage with tenants to support their day. So throughout our platform, we are able to integrate with the tenant engagement platforms, and we're platform agnostic. So this really allows us and the landlords to provide an exceptional experience. You see on the right-hand side, there's a notification for Katie that's letting her know we're sending a technician in to check the ventilation because she has reported that the conference room is uncomfortable on floor 4. And this really allows to provide preference-based data for the amenity spaces. As I mentioned, many of those spaces are being reconfigured right now because organizations are either looking to reduce the size of their footprint or to make their footprint the most optimal configuration for their tenants. And so a lot of investment is going into providing those amenities, especially in the Class A workspace. And so really providing the ability to real-time track how they're performing is very important for the facilities team. Let me show the next slide. Okay, so this is really important. I think this is one of the questions that's asking about specific energy and efficiency. So what we're able to do is reduce the cost and carbon with occupancy-based demand, what we call demand-controlled ventilation. So that's DCV. And what this means is that everything is contingent upon understanding how the spaces are being used in the by-the-minute time frame. So as I mentioned, rather than having your air conditioning run 2 hours before your office is open, say it open, most people come in around 9 a.m. Rather than starting the building being cooled across the board starting at 7, we use occupancy knowing with our predictive analytics to know which conference rooms, which offices, which floors will be used at which time. We also real-time adjust that based on the usage. And so this links into the BMS integrated completely, we're BMS agnostic as well. And this is occupancy-driven HVAC control. And you can do this down to the zone, down to the floor. We also allow this to provide the IAQ comfort backstop. So again, if a room's starting to feel stuffy, if there's too much carbon dioxide in the room because it's too dense, there's triggers that go off, and then the HVAC system would be used. And this really allows us to scope to affect scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions because of the different levels that are being given off. We can reduce those. Really, really important, obviously, for a number of stakeholders, LPs, investors, tenants, is the compliance and reporting to show reduction of these emissions, especially as you look at some of the new legislation that's being passed and really calling for net zero by 2030. There's a number of local areas and states that have already adopted this. So local law 97 in New York, California's leading many of the charges. So looking for very aggressive short-term changes that have been made as we look to reach those goals in the next 5 years.
And Jennifer, maybe I'll hop in here with a use case example, just addressing another one of the questions in the queue. So asking for real examples of these automations in the real world. So we are across a corporate office space that is, occupied, functioning on a daily basis, full of workers in and out of that space. And by implementing occupancy-based controls, we were able to achieve 50% energy savings on the lighting. So as you saw earlier, about 10% of the energy consumption in a building is due to lighting. So that's already just a 5% reduction. And on the HVAC, that was roughly 40% across the HVAC of the building. So those two combined, as well as just with the elements of heating and cooling water, the various inputs of wherever that energy is coming from, if it's coming from natural sources, where it's coming off of the grid, has an impact on what those CO2 reductions are and those scope 1 through 3 reductions are for the facility. But we can get into a very detailed analysis of the space. And so from a cost savings perspective, there's immediate ROI in the first year based on just implementing occupancy and temperature measurement across floors, as well as people counting and getting into full air quality measurement across floors. We can accomplish an ROI within that first year. based on those energy savings. And returning to some of the metrics and in the benchmarking, when we think about just the changing landscape of corporate real estate and office environments, there's no questioning that we are experiencing lower occupancy, which means that there's an opportunity for anyone in operations to achieve a higher energy savings. And so that's what we're really witnessing and being able to pull that through to the kilowatt hours and the dollars and cents.
Okay, so there's a couple of questions around air filtration. I want to cover one use case, and then we can answer some of these questions. So we are able to offer improved air filtration at a lower cost. So one of the products that we have from a hardware perspective is electrolyzed air filters that are safer than ionizers. They outperform HEPA filters while reducing the cost. The way that this works is it increases the ventilation energy savings, which really produces an ROI in 2 to 3 years, which is pretty powerful. Most of our clients are targeting a 5 or a 6 year payback, which it's hard to reach. These filters result in an ROI within 2 to 3 years, depending on the size of the HVAC and the local utility rate. They result in faster savings in areas that are widely varied in temperature, so hotter summer months, cooler winter months. What happens is the outside energy savings, they're 4 to 5 times greater than the ventilation. It's the most effective mechanism to achieve net zero. These are the filters that I was mentioning that allow for the efficacy of a MERV 15 at a cost of about a MERV 8. The secondary benefit for our customers is that it actually reduces the filter replacement time. So 2 to 3 times less frequently, keeping the maintenance labor costs low and reducing the total cost of delivery. This is really important because many of our customers are having difficulty maintaining the frontline workers in terms of janitorial and custodial, and they're looking to do anything they can to reduce manual costs for their team. So this is one example, a specific case we ran in a very large Class A building in Bryant Park in Manhattan, and they saw 28% savings within their pilot period, and then they outfitted the rest of the building. So that would be an example, real time, that started running just at the end of last year. So I think really important for the organizations that have already adopted specific air filtration levels, and now they're realizing that they solved one problem, which was the poor air in the building, but now they've exacerbated another problem, which was with the rising costs of energy, it's becoming cost prohibitive to be actually running and using these filters. This is only going to be exacerbated with ASHRAE 241. Many organizations have adopted the effective air changes per hour that ASHRAE 241 calls for. ASHRAE 241 calls for different air changes based on the type of the construction. So I really applaud ASHRAE for doing this. The first time these standards have been updated in 40 years. And for example, a hospital, senior care facility, commercial real estate, gym would have different requirements per hour. And as you think about those requirements, it only increases the amount of filtration that's necessary in the built environment. And so many organizations have recognized that they have to be able to do this, so to avoid penalties shortly, but that they need to do this not at a prohibitively high cost. Elizabeth, is there anything you want to comment here? There are a couple of questions around air filtration, if there's any you want to comment on. Otherwise, I think I covered a lot of them.
Yeah, I think we can keep going and then address the questions after kind of this final use case.
Okay, so this is another use case, which is about smart cleaning. So many customers are looking to streamline cleaning services based on data from occupancy and usage. So again, this goes to the need to and difficulty to hire custodial and janitorial. So this allows for usage that generates daily maps for the cleaning workflows. You can see on the right, we know which spaces were high trafficked. We know which rooms actually people crossed the thresholds, how long they were in there based on dwell time. And then we have a risk model that then calculates which spaces actually need real-time cleaning or less frequent cleaning. And so many customers have adopted this. It also, based on our utilization case study earlier, also allows for consolidation of spaces so that for example, from a owner-landlord perspective, that conference room A, B, and C were used in the morning, so those should be used in the afternoon again, rather than using D, E, and F, because then the cleaning crew would have to go through 6 conference rooms instead of 3 at the end of the day. So this is, eliminating the need for janitorial service. It's also providing real-time alerts as to when areas need maintenance and need cleaning. And so, we see here there's like an alert popping up that's saying, hey, the women's restroom has been visited this many times. Please check the supplies. So again, it makes the operational efficiency much more effective. One of our large customers is the Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic is using these type of alerts to make across the board, across their janitorial staff, as well as across their executive staff and their surgical staff, to make the operations shave minutes off of the day, because obviously within healthcare, minutes are very valuable, and they're looking to increase the amount of treatments and increase the amount of surgeries that can happen on a daily basis. So make sure that there's not time wasted. Okay, so I'm going to give you just a little bit of background about R0, and then in the minutes remaining, we'll try to get the rest of these questions through. So just in terms of our scale, right now we have 100 million, a little bit more than 100 million square feet that have been optimized across our tenant portfolio. Our CSAT score is 99%. Our NPS, Net Promoter Score, is 77. So our team is very focused on helping our partners and our customers quickly adapt to maximize the portfolio and scale with the needs of the business. So we are global. We obviously started in the United States. We have presence in Asia and in Europe. And this is the team that would support you. See, we have a number of accolades, winner of multiple awards. And I also have, just key customers that we partner with. So from the likes of large property management through CBRE, Hines, large technology companies, solutions companies, service companies, across all the verticals. So if you think about commercial real estate, large office buildings like Salesforce, Netflix, Indeed, to key hospital systems like Stanford, and then education and senior care facilities. We also wanted to provide you guys with a QR code here if you want to just zoom in with your camera or take a screenshot. I think this presentation will also perhaps be sent out. And this will allow you to contact either myself or Elizabeth with any questions or really any resource that we can serve. I think both of us have an extreme passion about the environment. It's one of the 3 main things that are important to me, the rest being digital health and education. Elizabeth has been in this built environment space as well for a long time, a number of years, a decade. So this is something that we're both really passionate about. We have years of experience to share. And just given the quick movement and the dynamic nature of the industry, I think more and more people should be working together to solve the issues that we're all facing, using technology to kind of outperform kind of antiquated solutions. Elizabeth, should we try to talk about these solutions? Yeah.
Yeah, on that point, I will address Kelly's question here in the queue about how occupancy-based demand control ventilation can address scope 3 emissions. So this is actually an opportunity that was brought to us by a large multinational REIT that is headquartered in Asia Pacific but has a global presence, and they were really trying to solve for their scope 3 emissions while maintaining an interest in their tenants' scope 1 through 2 emissions. And so there's an emerging opportunity to kind of cover that entire landscape, and that's for different stakeholders within the asset, from the owner and operator to the actual tenants of the space. So that those are different categories, those consume different categories of their ESG or their emissions reportings. So when we get into energy reduction opportunity, that may be for the operations of the building as well as for the operations of a business or the business function. And so that's really how we cover that full band. And I'll take one more here that's how do you define VOCs? Is there any specific type of gas that needs to be considered for office space? So TVOC is an element that is commonly measured just associated with gaseous compounds present in the environment. And that is one element that we specifically measure with our IAQ sensor that's part of our platform. But in addition to that, we measure for NOx, which is nitrogen oxides, and those are most relevant in air pollution. So that's often an indication of, has outdoor air been brought in that is actually polluting our indoor environment, and that may be associated with smog or acid rain, for example. And these are elements that do contribute to ozone creating gases within the environment. And so when we hear ozone, that's something we don't want to necessarily breathe in and out on a daily basis. So if you're measuring NOx in the indoor environment, that is going to have an impact on health. And that's something that an organization would want to address, or the operator of the building. The other one is formaldehyde, and formaldehyde has historically and very commonly been known as a cancer-causing substance. So formaldehyde is known in the gaseous form, and that's how we're measuring for it, is in the gaseous form. Is it present in the environment? And often formaldehyde is off-gassing from, pressed wood, other materials, upholstered materials within the environment. And if that is not drifting after a significant period of time, then that may be an indication that there's not enough ventilation in this area. So often that is a point of interest for our customers, really, when they move into a new location. The major contract furniture companies and those within the design industry have made significant strides over the last 25 years of removing these noxious compounds from their products, but there are still offensive gases like this present in our environments that we occupy on a daily basis. And that is one element that IAQ can measure for. These are all things that are invisible to us. So if we can measure them and respond to that with direct HVAC controls and increasing ventilation just where people are present, that may not have as significant of an impact on our energy spend, where we can simultaneously be balancing that increased ventilation with decreasing it where people are not. So that's how we can keep all of this in balance.
Elizabeth, in the last couple minutes, I think it would be helpful to go through a feature comparison of the various sensors. There's some specific questions as to installation, energy consumption, battery usage, as well as what they actually measure. So it might be helpful to go through both the occupancy sensors as well as the indoor air quality sensors.
Yeah. So of course, sensors do consume energy, but it's a very, very small amount. We've actually made significant strides over the past 5-7 years just in the energy consumption of the devices that we have in market. We're intentionally battery first and assume a very high degree of privacy and anonymity across our sensor portfolio. But on the energy piece, we actually ran a life cycle analysis a couple years ago on just our space counter in its battery form versus a people counter, space counter in a wired format. And the wired version had a 6x environmental impact compared to the battery version, which may not necessarily be what you would assume, because our common conception is that batteries are bad for the environment, but it's the copper actually associated with cabling that has such an incredible environmental impact. So that is important for us to maintain a number of devices on our platform that are battery powered, and that also means that they're very affordable to deploy compared to anything hardwired, as well as the the optionality of moving them and changing as space changes over time. And the other kind of significant element there is privacy and anonymity. So we've designed kind of the AI and ML to sit on our devices itself. So all elements are analyzed within our sensors so that we are preserving privacy to the greatest extent compared to other systems and technologies on the platform or on the market.
Great. Thank you guys so much. So I'm back on to wrap us up today, but I want to give a huge thank you to Jennifer and Elizabeth for such a wonderfully informative webinar today. Please utilize that QR code that's still up on your screen there if you want to get in touch with R0 at any point. And a reminder that this was recorded, so you'll get a link to that recording within 24 hours. So if you want to go back and view any part of this content, it will be there for you. And before you log off, if you'll take a moment and complete the feedback, it lets us know how you like the session, how we can improve in the future. And just a reminder to come see us at Greenbuild in a couple months. So it will kick off in Philadelphia on November 12th, and our registration rates go up after tomorrow. So just a quick plug there. So, but thank you to R0 for bringing us this content today. Thank you for all of you who were engaged and all the wonderful questions that you all sent through today. And we look forward to seeing you guys next time. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.